Good evening, everyone. Today I'm reviewing 1984 by George Orwell. Now, I'm a little late to the game when it comes to reading this book. Most people who are into books, into novels, reading fiction have probably already read this, or apparently a lot of people read it in school, so I'm not sure how many people are actually going to need this video. But I'm going to be reviewing it briefly, and hopefully by the end of the video you'll be able to decide whether or not you want to read it, purchase the book and read it. That'll always be up to you and your own discretion, but I'll just give you my opinions on it. This was my first fiction novel. Everything I've read so far, all my book reviews I've done have all been nonfiction, self-help or just something that's happened in the world, stories, real stories. And this was my first fiction book, George Orwell's 1984, and it was very good. It was good, but it was terrifying, and every time I stopped reading it, I always closed the book and kind of felt uneasy a little bit. Just because, there's a lot of fiction stories out there that are like, okay, that's never going to happen. It's a very entertaining world to immerse yourself in, but it's never going to happen in real life. Like Harry Potter, for example. Great book series. Everyone loves Harry Potter. But you don't think oh my Lord, that could happen in my life. You don't think that, obviously. We're never going to become wizards. But with George Orwell's 1984, the story in this book, what Winston goes through, Winston is the main character, it is entirely possible for our future. George Orwell wrote this for entertainment, of course, but he also wrote it as a chilling prediction of the future, where he thought the world was going. Now, obviously, it didn't happen in 1984. This book was written, I believe, sometime in 1940, and he predicted this would happen in 1984 or sometime in the future. We're way past 1984. We haven't entered a totalitarian world or a tyrannical world that this book depicts, but it could still happen one day, and that's what's so eerie and terrifying about this book. But basically, it's about a man named Winston who's in a dystopian future, who's in 1984. And you have to remember that this book was written in 1940. So when this book was written, 1984 was the future. So basically, this book takes place in the future. And he's in a world where Big Brother and just this huge tyrannical party has taken over pretty much the world. There's three separate ruling parties of the world. Oceania is the one he lives in, and they're constantly at war, and they're at war because they want to deplete the excess production of resources to leave people in poverty, because if people are in poverty, they can't think for themselves, etc., etc. Terrifying totalitarianism. I cannot pronounce the word. Anyways, it just tells a story of him going through that world. He's one of the only people who's against the ruling party, who's against the upper class, who's against Big Brother. And it's just him navigating the world, still thinking on his own, still thinking clearly when everyone around him is not. Everyone around him is basically almost emotionless people who just don't think for themselves anymore. They don't resist authority. They don't resist, their independence and their rights being taken away anymore, because they don't have any rights anymore and they own nothing. And that's the kind of world everybody lives in, and that's the kind of world our main character in this story goes through. And it is terrifying. He meets people who are on his side, or one person in the book who's kind of on his side, and then they meet someone else. Do not read the prefix of this book. This version, at least, that I bought on Amazon, the introduction, the person who, I don't know who actually wrote the introduction to this book, but they basically just gave a little history on George Orwell. They spoil it. I got spoiled very hard. One of the biggest twists in the book, which was a very good twist, was spoiled. So don't read the beginning introduction part to this book if you buy the same version I got on Amazon, and the cover looks like this. I don't know what the actual version is called, but yeah. Very good book, very terrifying book, but a must-read. I think it's necessary for people to read this book so that they can be scared. So when we see these changes being implemented in our society, we can resist them because we know what they could possibly lead to, because George Orwell painted that picture for us. And if you've ever heard of like Orwellian thought, or that sounds Orwellian, or anyone say Big Brother's watching you, it all comes from this book. It all comes from George Orwell, because George Orwell's prediction was so chilling and so possible for our future that people use his name for a school of thought when they think about totalitarianism, tyranny, authority taking over, which is kind of happening in our life today. People in the UK getting arrested for posting memes on social media and thinking and speaking what they want. Free speech is under attack, all that stuff. It all reminds you of this book, or this book reminds you of it. And so I think it's important to read it so that you can become scared, so you can resist whenever changes like that happen. So we don't have to live in a world that is like 1984. That would be the goal. But yeah, a great book. I mean, the entire time I could read for hours on this book. And that's not true for some of the fiction books or nonfiction books that I read. But this book, I could sit down and I could read it for hours. And it was very good. The entire story was very good. Just him describing, a lot of it's him just describing the world he lives in. And it's not a pretty one. I would get done reading this sometimes and then like go outside and just like take a deep breath and be like, okay, we still live in a beautiful world. I have rights. I'm not being brainwashed. The people around me aren't being brainwashed. We think for ourselves. We have our own original thoughts. We're allowed to love each other and get married to who we want and work the jobs we want. It makes you super thankful for the life you live too. But I guess I'm not trying to give lessons from this book. I'm just trying to review it as a novel entertainment book. And it was very entertaining. I enjoyed it very much. I highly recommend you read it. Very gripping. Very old book. It's almost been out for almost a century now. Most people have probably already read it. But if you have not, I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching.